You are, by and large, one of two kinds of people in the lives of the people that you're in relationship with. And the first is you might be the kind of person they want to open up to. They want to share the important things that are going on in their lives right now. And they're excited to share them with you. The second kind of person you may be is the kind of person that people want to clam up around. They don't want to share anything significant, and they actually are pretty vigilant to make sure the conversation stays at a very surface level. And which of those two kinds of people you are, which of the two kinds of reaction you get from others is not an accident. So, how do you become the first kind of person that people really look forward to sharing with? Hi everybody, I'm Greg from Heart Tools, where we make it simple to build great relationships. And there is a simple tool that you can use that will help you become the kind of person that your wife, your kids, your adult kids, your friends, your coworkers are really eager to open up to and connect with. It's a tool called validation, which is simply letting other people know that their emotions make sense. And it is rarely used, and because of that, it can be a real game changer in your relationships. When practicing using the tool of validation, it's important to think about when to use it and how to use it. So we're going to talk first about when to use the tool of validation, because as you're listening with empathy, you don't have to validate every emotion that someone expresses, but there are 3 times where it's really helpful to use the tool of validation. The first is when you notice that someone is invalidating themselves. We've already talked about how there is really an epidemic of invalidation in our society. And because people have been invalidated so often, you will often find that they invalidate themselves when they think someone else would. So someone may say something like, I know I should feel thankful. I know I shouldn't be angry. I know I shouldn't be this angry, right? It's okay to be a little bit angry, but I'm too angry, right? And so they'll invalidate themselves. And so if you take that moment to listen with empathy and then validate the emotion they're experiencing, that helps them take themselves more seriously. And it will help them, if that happens to them often enough, to learn how to use their relational dashboard, how to connect their emotions to the important things going on in their relationship universe, because that's what our emotions are, right? They're always a signal about something going on in our universe. But if we invalidate ourselves, we never get to discover what that is. The second moment where it can be really helpful to validate someone is when they're sharing a particularly intense emotion, especially if that emotion can make them look weak or bad, right? And so in my culture, it's often appeared as weak for men to feel afraid. Real men don't get afraid, they get angry, right? They make things happen. They're not afraid. And so if you have a friend who's opening up to you and they're just feel like terrified that they're going to lose their job, or really afraid that they're not going to be able to build a great relationship with their kids, and they express that intense emotion and you take that seriously and validate it, that is hugely helpful for them in taking seriously what's going on in their heart. And it's also a signal that you send to them that you are a safe person to share the deep things of their heart with. The third moment where it can really be helpful to validate someone is when they share an emotion that may seem taboo in that particular culture or environment. For example, if someone says, boy, I'm so angry at God right now, I don't know if I'll ever be able to pray again, right? And they're in a church culture where if you're angry at God, then you're not doing it right because God is good and you don't understand. And yet, as we read the Hebrew scriptures, there are the people who were closest to God often got the angriest at him And God seemed to have big enough shoulders to handle that kind of emotional reaction from people. Or someone may say something like, I'm just so frustrated with my kids right now, I can't even be around them, right? Which is a very raw, honest thing to do. But it's also the kind of thing where you think, man, if I say that, I'm a horrible dad or I'm a horrible mom, and it feels taboo, right? And so that can be a really helpful time to have your emotions validated. So those three moments, if someone is invalidating themselves, if someone is expressing an intense emotion, especially if it makes them look weak, or if someone is expressing a taboo emotion, that's the time where it can really be helpful for you to validate what they're feeling. So how do you validate someone's emotions? Well, in general, it's just by making a simple statement that lets them know their emotions make sense. So you could say something like, it sure makes sense that you were devastated by that news, or I can see why you're so hurt by that letter from your mom, or boy, if I were in your shoes, I would feel the same thing. So just a simple statement that lets them know that you think their emotions make sense. Now, sometimes you can go a step further if you've had a similar experience with someone by mentioning that as well, right? And so you could say something like, boy, it sure makes sense that you are confused and angry right now. I also got laid off about 5 years ago, and I was confused and angry for a long time. And then sometimes what you can do is go the opposite direction and communicate, I have no idea what you're experiencing, right? Someone just experienced an intense loss that you've never had, and you can validate that emotion by saying something like, man, I can't even imagine how painful this must be for you. One final thought about using this tool of validation, and that is use validation after you've used the tool of listening with empathy, right? Because one of the things that we've talked about and what you've probably already experienced is as you listen with empathy and you try to figure out what someone's emotions are and then you reflect that back to them, sometimes you have the wrong emotion, sometimes you have the wrong thought. And so by listening with empathy first, you ensure that you're validating the right emotion, right? You don't want to invalidate anger when someone is really expressing sadness. And so use listening with empathy first and then validation afterwards. So for this video, I want to encourage you to practice, continue listening with empathy, and then pay attention to when someone is invalidating themselves as they share, or when someone is expressing a particularly intense emotion, or when someone is expressing emotion that may feel taboo in certain circumstances. And in those moments, validate, boy, it sure makes sense that you're feeling that right now. And that can be a game changer in your relationship with the people closest to you, the people that you love, in their willingness and even desire to open up to you and share what's really going on in their hearts. So practice that. Simple steps. Practice, practice, practice. That's what Heart Tools is all about.